right, good afternoon. It is a few minutes after 2 o'clock, and I thought we would go ahead and get started. As you know, today's guest is Susan McCalmont from Oklahoma City and the Kirkpatrick Foundation. What we were going to do is we're going to start out with a video from President Betts. He wasn't able to be here today. He is actually out of the country. And so he did a video for us to introduce Susan, and then I'll follow up with a couple of background information and then have her join us at the podium. And then, like our other classes, Susan and I will sit down here and have a brief conversation, but then open it up for that question and answer and dialogue based off the comments that she brings. So with that, I'm going to do the video.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Leadership and Change Forum. As you can tell, I'm not able to join you today. Unfortunately, I'm somewhere else, but I'm glad you're all together for this very important session. I am so pleased to be able to lend my welcome to Susan McCalmont, who is with us today, the Executive Director of the Kirkpatrick Foundation. Susan is one of the great patrons of the arts and one of the great leaders in art education and creativity, not just in Oklahoma, but across the country. I've had the good fortune of knowing Susan for some years and have marveled at her work and at her leadership. I could give you a litany of accomplishments that Susan has already achieved, but just a few. The creator of the Da Vinci Institute, which has made a huge difference in terms of the promotion of the arts in education. The Oklahoma A+ school system. The whole Creative Oklahoma movement, to me, is the brainchild of Susan McCalmont. I consider her the godmother of this whole idea. And the fact that Oklahoma held the World Creativity Forum this past year in Oklahoma City, which was attended by over 2,600 people, is again a testimony to her leadership and to her sense of understanding of the role that creativity plays in all of our lives. This is going to be a very special session here at Northeastern State University for the Leadership and Change Forum, and I'm so pleased to welcome Susan McCalmont today.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad to be here. So, what's really the big deal about creativity? I really, it's everywhere in the media. It's suddenly the big issue on Obama's agenda. It was included in his State of the Union address that we must innovate, America must innovate. Likewise, it was on our new governors in her State of the State address about how Oklahoma needs to innovate. So really, what is the big deal here, and why is everybody talking about it, and why do we see the words creativity and innovation everywhere in the media? Creativity is everywhere, and our world is certainly engulfed in dynamic, rapid pace of change. Next slide, please. It's an economic and cultural revolution that's really primarily driven by two things. It's driven by technology and the devices that you have in your hand, and it's also driven a lot by demography. Our world population right now is at 6.9 billion people. Take India, for example. 25% of India's students with the brightest IQs, that total is greater than the total population of the U.S. India has more honor students than the U.S. even has kids. So it's demography and technology that is really kind of driving this new economic revolution. There's a different economic model, though, at play. And we're seeing an economic shift from the 19th century industrial model, where, America was very involved in, with the Industrial Revolution and industries scattered throughout our country, to the 20th century information age, to the 21st century conceptual age. And if you were at the Creativity Forum, Daniel Pink of A Whole New Mind, who authored that book, spoke a lot about it. It's really an era of new ideas, looking for the next innovative idea. I'm going to read to you an article off the Business Wire from January 26th of this year. And GE, of course, one of our mainstay corporations in the U.S., did a study, the GE Global Innovation Barometer, and they interviewed 1,000 business executives in 12 countries. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit that the Business Wire says. This study illustrates that the rules around innovation are changing and that companies like ours will need to evolve our strategy in order to stay competitive, drive growth, and contribute meaningfully to the economy, said Beth Comstock, Chief Marketing Officer and Senior VP for GE. For innovation to flourish, we must embrace a new innovation paradigm that promotes collaboration between all players, big, small, public, and private, fosters creativity, and emphasizes solutions that meet local needs. In the study, innovation was consistently seen as a strong driver of a prosperous economy. 95% of executives said innovation is the main lever for a more competitive national economy, and 88% agreed that innovation is the best way to create jobs in their country. Respondents also emphasized creativity as a critical means to innovation. Nearly 7 in 10 said that innovation is now driven more by people's creativity than by high-level scientific research, while 58% agreed that having more out-of-the-box thinkers on the team is the number one factor that would help companies innovate more. So, how can we compete in this global society of knowledge-based industries? And I'm just going to pose 3 questions for you. Do our current systems of education and our work environments encourage creative thought or squelch it? Now, most of you are in school, so just think about your learning environments in schools and K-12 schools you've been in. Were you in learning environments that encouraged you to collaborate and think outside the box, or was that learning and that idea generation squelched? Same for those of you in the professional sector in your work environments. Now, we're defining creativity not as just the arts, but really creativity as a process of developing original ideas that have value. The second question is, do we believe that everyone has creative potential? Not just artists and designers and scientists, but that we're all born with it. It's an inherent human capacity that we are all born with. Do you believe that? And then third, do we believe that one can cultivate and grow their creative abilities? Do you believe that creativity can essentially be taught and learned? America's future depends upon how we individually and collectively respond to these questions. Now, America has been known as the land of inventors, going back to even Benjamin Franklin moving from England to the U.S. so that he could patent his many inventions. Our very democratic principles upon which this country was founded, it's all about freedom of ideas, an ability to create, to innovate, and to prosper. Yet America is falling woefully behind. And a lot of this is attributed to our antiquated 19th century industrial model of education. It seems as though our 19th century systems for teaching, with a teacher at the front of the class regurgitating factual information that, or delivering factual information that she expected students to regurgitate back to her and be tested on. That was an industrial era model. They were trying to produce factory workers who were compliant and who would follow instructions. 20th century, that model stood and did not change during the information age very much at all. Now we're in the 21st century. A whole century's gone by without any effective change in our educational systems, and the world is passing us by. It's very discouraging sometimes to walk into schools, as I often do, even kindergartens arenas sometimes, where children are doing worksheets or coloring inside the lines or being told to sit in their seats and don't work with one another, and don't work in groups, and you need to take this test. If America does not do something about its educational systems, we will continue to lag far behind countries that have skipped over 20th century and they're into the 21st century, such as India and China, and some of the countries that we oftentimes thought of as third world. They are now bypassing America in many ways. We have to find ways to encourage minds to think creatively, to work collaboratively, and to generate ideas, because we have many, many issues that need creative solutions in our world and in our communities. Now, the question on the screen, Oklahoma, the state of creativity. Now, really, now most of you are from Oklahoma. And really, I mean, do we really think that Oklahoma, a state of 3.6 million people, landlocked in the middle of the country, this tiny little state, only having celebrated its 100 years of statehood, could possibly help lead America into this globally competitive marketplace of ideas as a state of creativity? Well, I moved here 22 years ago from the state of Virginia, and when I moved to Oklahoma, I saw a lot of inherent beauty. I met wonderful people, but I was being constantly told by Oklahomans that I shouldn't have come, that it was ugly. How could I have possibly left the East Coast? They're very, very apologetic, and I sensed a great sense of a poor self-esteem for the state when I moved here. And Oklahoma did a very poor job of promoting itself outside the state. So my only reference points for Oklahoma were Grapes of Wrath, the musical Oklahoma, the Trail of Tears, and tornadoes. So, but again, the reality that I found over the last 22 years, and especially my work with the foundation, is that Oklahoma is one of the wealthiest places for human resources. The reality is that Oklahoma boasts more astronauts than any other state. The reality is that more musicians from every genre and impacting the international music scene are from Oklahoma. There are more Native American artists in Santa Fe from Oklahoma. There are more inventors with more patents, especially in the oil and gas industry, from Oklahoma. So we have the ingenuity, we have the creativity, and we have the inventiveness of our people that should define us and distinguish us as a creative place. So I feel like, why not? Why can't we go ahead and call Oklahoma the state of creativity? Now, there are some reasons that I, along with many others, came to this decision to just begin claiming Oklahoma as the state of creativity. One of my partners in crime is John McCarroll, who's the director of Oklahoma Public Television at OETA, and he had moved from Austin, where he had helped to develop Austin City Limits, and knew about the power of media. He said that people began flocking to Austin because there was a perception that there was a live music culture emerging in Austin, Texas, through a television show. So he said, Austin is not the live music capital of the world, but they continue to claim it. And he said, and encouraged me and many others to think of Oklahoma as one of the most creative places, not only in the U.S., but in the world, because of our people, and that we can start claiming it, start talking about it, and be encouraged, and it will buoy our self-esteem. Now, Oklahoma is doing several things to cultivate and recognize our creative capacity so that we can rightfully lay title to this leadership role. There are many initiatives going across the state, and at lunch today I learned about some amazing things happening in this part of the state. But there are some initiatives that Dr. Betts mentioned that he asked me to talk with you about, just so that you're familiar with some of these exciting initiatives, especially in education, that are occurring in the state. The first one is the Da Vinci Institute. In 1998, universities and colleges across the state of Oklahoma came together to form a coalition to initially support arts education in K-12 schools. As everyone knows, when budgets are squeezed either to state level or local level, the arts are usually the first to go. And many of us understand that the sciences and arts are some of the very curricular areas that encourage creative thought and inquiry. But with No Child Left Behind, that was a former, the former federal administration, there was a tightening of the curriculum to focus very much on math and reading. So as that directive came down from Washington, the interpretation of that legislation was to squeeze the budget to move arts, sciences, foreign language, history, some of those very important areas off the page or to minimal curricular area. Universities and colleges in Oklahoma in 1998 were very, very concerned about that, and specifically about the arts. So they came together and began asking questions, and their questions were, well, we're in higher ed, we're deans and administrators and faculty in higher ed, what can we possibly do to help? So they started bringing in speakers. They brought in the likes of Richard Florida, they brought in Sir Ken Robinson, they brought in Elliot Eisner, very well-known speakers to help educate them about what could be done. Because there was a lot of thinking at the time that it's not just about the arts, but it's really about creative thinking. And at that time, Sir Ken Robinson was someone who was just emerging on the national scene. He had already been involved internationally talking about these very issues. We brought him to Oklahoma early and began looking at how the arts, the sciences, and humanities came together. So in Oklahoma, it started with our arts faculty at higher ed, and then science faculty came together with the arts faculty, and the humanities faculty came together, and they formed what they are calling the Da Vinci Institute, looking at the personhood of Da Vinci, the impact of that person, and how we can all be Da Vincis in our own right, especially in Oklahoma's colleges and universities. Today, that's now 13 years later, they have an annual awards program honoring teaching, creativity and teaching at the higher ed level. And they are very, very well respected. There is now a group of Da Vinci Fellows who form a speakers bureau, some of our best and brightest faculty across the state. One of the most important contributions, though, of the Da Vinci Institute was in 2000, they helped to create the Oklahoma A+ schools. Now, the Oklahoma A+ schools was discovered in North Carolina by an OSU research team. The research team was looking all over the U.S. for any type of research-based whole school reform model for K-12 schools that incorporated the arts, incorporated creative thinking, experiential learning, collaboration, and looked at a new paradigm for learning. This model was found in North Carolina. It was only intended to be a research model. The Da Vinci Institute was instrumental in bringing that model to Oklahoma. And today we have 65 whole schools, public, private, charter schools in the state, totally devoted to school change around creativity. There are over 100 fellows or mentor teacher trainers, and they have summer institutes and have year-round professional development. There is, if you go to their website, there's a 5-year qualitative, quantitative research study on these schools that prove, and this research is of a lot of national interest because it does show evidence when teachers do not teach to the test, but they're teaching true content in an experiential way and integrating the arts and creativity into instruction, that kids perform academically better, and that they also, the school environment is changed, so attendance is up, disciplinary issues are down, children love being in school, and there's a lot of anecdotal information in this research study that is gaining a lot of national attention. The Da Vinci Institute, Oklahoma A+ schools worked very closely together in 2000 with Kirkpatrick Foundation and OETA to encourage this K-20 transformation. And I had the privilege in 2004 in attending the Aspen Institute with the director of OETA. And we attended a conference on that essentially was about why are the arts and sciences and the humanities segregated on a federal level and on a state level and on our university campuses. Why do we segregate in these silos? Because we know when these disciplines come together, there are creative sparks and energy and new solutions. We met a filmmaker there named David Kennard from San Francisco who was looking for a laboratory to document stories of creativity. And he was very concerned, as were we, about America. And he was entitled his film Recreating America, looking for some hotbed of creative activity. We invited him to Oklahoma, and when he came, he was blown away by what he saw. We also then at that time re-engaged with Sir Ken Robinson, who had moved to the U.S. He was also looking for a U.S. laboratory where creativity was happening. And we had Da Vinci Institute, we had Oklahoma A+ schools, and we could show evidence of the impact that creativity was having in schools and in communities throughout the state. This started a whole level of roundtable discussions where we brought together business leaders, we brought together the unlikely, we brought together, I remember we had the manager of the Flaming Lips at a meeting with your former president, Roger Webb, and an oil and gas executive, and you can imagine people who had never been together in conversation, the types of creative solutions that could come together from a meeting of those minds. Those sorts of roundtable conversations then that began in 2004 and continued in 2005 gave birth to Creative Oklahoma. In 2005, we had a meeting at the governor's mansion with Sir Ken Robinson and Burns Hargis, who is now the president at Oklahoma State. And in 2006, Creative Oklahoma was incorporated as a statewide nonprofit. It's set up as a framework for change for the state of Oklahoma, for all of us. We officially launched Creative Oklahoma in 2008, and its purpose is to work to build a statewide culture of change focused on new ideas that have value in education, commerce, and culture. It's linking education, commerce, culture. It's working to shift public perception about Oklahoma externally and internally and to build the internal self-esteem of the state. It's to begin connecting education to the needs of business and the workplace. And it's to document stories of Oklahoma and of Oklahoma creativity and broadcast outside the state, and encouraging idea generation in schools and business to spur innovation. Now, some of the major accomplishments have been this Recreating America film that's been broadcast on PBS about Oklahoma schools, a whole series on OETA. You can go to OETA's website, and they have a whole series of documentaries on the state of creativity, stories around Oklahoma, highlighting and documenting our creativity as a state. We helped to bring the first robotics competition from Houston, Texas to Oklahoma. That increased the number of robotic high school teams competing from 1 to 53 last year, coming from Oklahoma. We helped in a collaborative partnership, again with Dr. Webb, to bring the Academy of Contemporary Music from Guilford, England to Oklahoma. And that is a very important educational link to growing the music industry in Oklahoma. And then the variety of university creative campus initiatives like you have here at Northeastern, they're beginning to emerge all over the state. Educational conferences and creativity conversations that have occurred. Now, I'd like to just share with you a very short video of Sir Ken Robinson talking a little bit about the work in Oklahoma.
So what we're trying to do in the Oklahoma Creativity Project is to establish a statewide collaboration, effectively. it isn't that we're trying to just get one or two big projects off the ground. The thing about creative thinking is it can happen anywhere, in any field. And our policy is, so to speak, to encourage 1,000 flowers to bloom. There may be great projects up in the Panhandle, there may be great projects in the south of the state, as well as in Tulsa or Oklahoma. There may be great projects in sport, as well as in science or technology, as well as in music and theatre, as well as in business. So what we're encouraging people to do is to come up with initiatives in their own field of work, where they are. But what we're trying to do is put people in contact with each other so that there's a kind of cross-fertilization of ideas. Because part of the problem is people aren't aware of what else is going on, and therefore how they might partner. And already I think the success of the project has been in putting people in touch with each other, not because they're like-minded, but because they're trying to achieve something similar. In fact, very often, the best work comes from people who don't think in the same way, but can find a way of working together. So collaboration is certainly at the heart of it. And nobody has a safe ticket into the future. So being able to innovate, to come up with new ideas, to be flexible, to ride the change and help to shape the future is absolutely critical. But of course, it's not just about business and the economy. People need great places to live, great places to educate their children, and great personal opportunities. So the Creativity Project is about all of that. It's helping to develop and harness the huge capacities in Oklahoma for great ideas, for new thinking, for new business opportunities, for great cultural provision, so that Oklahoma becomes a player in the 21st century. What Oklahoma is attempting to do, almost every state in the Union is trying to do. There's a national initiative now called Innovation America, because every state in the Union recognizes that the things that have worked so far may not sustain regions or the country in the 21st century. But I think there's a unique opportunity here in Oklahoma, partly because it's not overpopulated. If you go to a big state with a huge population, it's harder to shift things. In Oklahoma, what may be seen as a weakness is actually its strength. There is a relatively small population with some focused areas of population as well, some strong urban areas, and some really key leaders here who can help to, I think, focus and galvanize a process that would really accelerate change in Oklahoma if we get it right. And I think if we get it right, then many other states in America will be beating a path to the door of Oklahoma saying, how did you do this? There's a model here we can learn from. And it's not just Oklahoma. There's a network of creative regions around the world, which I hope Oklahoma will join shortly. And they're fascinated to know what's going on here. So I think with the will and a commitment and the right set of processes, what's happened in Ireland, what's happened in other parts of the world could certainly happen here in Oklahoma. It won't happen overnight, by the way. It won't be in a week or a month or a year or 2 years. It will take time. But the question is to commit to the process. As soon as it begins, the curriculum will start to evolve. And I think there's an opportunity here that doesn't exist in many other places currently.
Now, the international network that Sir Ken referenced, Oklahoma was invited to be part of that in 2008. And this map is difficult to see, but you can go to dcnetwork.org. And Oklahoma is the only region in North America which is part of this international network of districts of creativity. There are 14 around the world. And you see Oklahoma. I mean, we have achieved this international connectivity in a fairly short period of time. Now, what this network does, they are responsible for having the annual Creativity World Forum, which was held this year, and I know many of you attended that. But they also have collaborative projects, exchanging ideas. There are student exchange opportunities. There are trade and economic development opportunities that are emerging, and it's very exciting. This year, in November, we also launched a national creativity network. Oklahoma is now the center of a North American hub of about 12 creative districts around the U.S. and Canada who are now linking together, and they are seeking counsel and support and interchange with Oklahoma. We have groups out of New Jersey, Massachusetts, Ohio. Now there's a Create West Virginia group. There's a Creative Alberta group that is patterning their entire initiative after Oklahoma, one in Ottawa, and we are all now connected in this very nascent effort in this National Creativity Network. There is a basic website that you can go to, and its headquarters will be here in Oklahoma. Many of you, as I mentioned, did attend the Creativity World Forum, and as Dr. Betts mentioned, there were over 2,600 people who descended upon Oklahoma at the Cox Center in Oklahoma City for 2.5 days, with 38 states and 18 countries represented during that time. It gave Oklahoma the sort of visibility that we could never have bought, and was a perception changer for so many people who saw that there are creative businesses, there are creative educational institutions here. The Creativity World Biennale was our contribution, a cultural contribution to the network that will continue 2 years from now when the Creativity World Forum is held in Rio, and we'll be sending Oklahoma artists to Rio to represent us. Next year, the event will be held in Belgium, and we're just very proud that we were able to set the bar high here in Oklahoma, and that those international guests, we had the largest gathering of international guests in Oklahoma ever for the Creativity World Forum, that they were able to benefit and see so much. I want to just share another video with you of that is actually representative and was made by Northeastern students of your experiences at the Creativity World Forum. I'm so proud that this reflection from Northeastern is being shared with the world now. And that could not have been accomplished without all of us coming together in the state to connect internationally with our partners. So I ask the question, are imagination and creativity essential in our 21st century global economy? Again, we hear innovation, it's the new political mantra, but it cannot be established without the bedrock foundation of first, imagination. And I just want us to think about this continuum of we call it the ICI continuum. Imagination first, the capacity to conceive of what is not yet present or manifest. 2, creativity is imagination applied to do or make something that flows from the prior capacity to conceive of the new. And I want us to make sure that we understand it goes in this sequence. You must have imagination first, creativity, and then the third is innovation, which is creative actions that advance the form, depths, and reach and richness of what has been brought into being. There are immense creative resources lying dormant in our students and in our institutions and our organizations, especially in our highly accountable learning environments. We must challenge ourselves and our institutions to encourage and not stifle new ideas and creative thought. And I want to leave you with a quote from Sir Ken Robinson. Quote, "Our best hope for the future is to develop a new paradigm of human capacity to meet a new era of human existence. We need to evolve a new appreciation of the importance of nurturing human talent, along with an understanding of how human talent expresses itself differently in every individual. We need to create environments in our schools and our workplaces and in our public offices where everyone is inspired to grow creatively, because as the world evolves, the very future of our communities and our institutions will depend on it." So today I want to encourage you to harness your creativity, be a creative Oklahoman, and to take your place on the world stage. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for your words and your insight to the importance of creativity, well, imagination, creativity, and innovation. You know, this room is filled primarily with college students here, and one thing I was thinking about is, you know, you're a change agent in the state. Your impact has affected us all in one way or another already. How does a college student who is just starting out in their lives, what advice would you give?
Well, I guess, you know, we all have just our own individual experience to live from. And I would say in my own personal experience, I wasn't thinking much about these things when I was graduating from college or even when I was in college. It was a very different world then. I had dreams of going to Europe. I had dreams of going to Africa and impacting the world. But there were economic constraints where I just could not do that. And so I began to just walk through doors that began opening for me when I worked after school and in the Washington, D.C. area that led to where I am today. But the world is so different today. I mean, you do have global access today. If you have interest, if you have an idea, and you have an opportunity to connect, you have an interest in world hunger in Kenya, you can find a way to help today from your dorm room. And there are students who are developing their own nonprofits and their own for-profit businesses from their dorm room to impact the world. It's very easy with the technology software that you have available to have collaboration platforms across countries, not just across campus, but across the state, across the nation, across the world. And I didn't have that opportunity. I think if those opportunities presented themselves when I was in school, all of my love of the arts, I was an art history major, and my love of American history and civics and civic engagement, I think that I would have been overwhelmed with the opportunities to connect and to help make the world a better place earlier in my life.
Thank you. One more question, and then I'll open up to the floor. I consistently ask students who I interview how they define leadership. So I'd like to ask you, what does leadership mean to you?
Okay. I think that There are many leaders who I have admired, and both women and men, young and old. And when I look at common traits, I think I look for strong character, for honesty. I look for people whose heart I can trust, and I look for people who are driven by an internal motivation, by an internal passion for something. I mean, we've all seen good elected leaders. We have all seen successful appointed leaders in government, in our workplaces, and we respect them. But I think the true leaders who make a difference in the world are those who they recognize what their sort of God-given inherent talents and abilities are. They're putting them online to make the world a better place, and they're driven by an internal passion, but they're doing it with utmost honesty and with strong ethics.
Thank you. All right. Who'd like to go first? Yes, ma'am.
What would you like to see change? What do you think the first steps to change in the education system would be to make it more creative, more open to students?
Well, I've seen the change, and it's real change that has occurred within A+ schools, within K-12 schools, and I think it starts with a desire of the will to change. Every year, all principals and superintendents throughout the state of Oklahoma are issued an invitation to join the A+ School Network at no charge at all to that school. But it requires, for A+ schools to be admitted into the network, it requires 85% of the faculty and administrators of that school system to agree that they want change. And that seems to be the determining factor for school change that we've seen. Those who have leaders and who have a core group at an 85% level who really want change. Now, once they decided that they want to enter into the A+ Schools Network, it really isn't about more money being thrown at the school, but it's about a determination to work collaboratively together, to teach experientially, to look at the gifts and talents of every teacher and every administrator within that building. I mean, there may be someone teaching history who has a minor in music who could be pulled into another classroom to team teach. You have to have an administrator who's assessing all of the gifts and talents within that school culture and bring them to bear on that environment. I think that there's also a need for mutual respect of colleagues within the learning environment. And we know because of the pecking order that has existed on federal levels and even state levels over time, that the math teachers are up here, but the arts teachers are at the bottom. So when there's a climate of mutual respect, that shifts the learning environment, and school change does occur. They very much do. In fact, it's interesting. Schools that are admitted into the program attend a 5-day residential institute, and there's ongoing professional development at the school site throughout the year. But they call the learning environment not just teachers and administrators, but the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, the parents. It's an inclusive learning community that is considered. So if parents want to attend the professional development and the training, they're invited to do so. So it's, I believe their motto is nurturing creativity in every learner, with the idea that we're all continually learning, and when we stop learning, that's where the danger begins to set in for all of us.
In an area like Oklahoma that is especially linguistically diverse, and just being native speakers and people that are coming in speaking as well, but in that situation where they is there much of an emphasis on foreign languages and that, but even more so in arts and music and sometimes that push the side as well?
Right. I know that they have taken that into great consideration because, there are several curricular areas in foreign languages certainly included in the curricular areas that have been diminished in so many schools. So they're trying to find different delivery methods, especially in areas where foreign language teachers are not available, and looking not just at distance learning, but looking at native foreign language speakers who might be in the community who could help supplement in certain school situations. So they're looking for all community resources within a geographic area to become part of that learning community.
Okay.
What's changed? Like, is there like a site where you can see schools like before and after?
You can see if you go to the A+ Schools website and you look at the research will tell stories of sort of before and after and in process. It's not like, okay, I've been 1 year in the A+ Schools network and now I'm a totally changed school. As Ken Robinson said, it's a process over time. And although we have 65 schools now in the A+ School network, they're all at different entry points in the implementation of the A+ methodology. So there are some at a very heightened level, and A+ is now in the process of tiering the schools, so you will have the high demonstration level schools and those who are kind of at a mid-level and those who are just at an entry level. So I believe that that is coming if it's not already on their website. And I would encourage you to visit the schools. A+ Schools, thanks to your former president and current president, Dr. Webb and Dr. Betts, were very instrumental in helping A+ Schools as it came to Oklahoma through this nonprofit, the Da Vinci Institute. We knew for it to be sustained over time, it needed to be associated with the university, and it's currently housed at the University of Central Oklahoma, although it has a reach throughout the state and is not just tied to that one university.
I also heard you say that the engagement of the school kids in the A+ schools has changed, like lower dropout rates, right? And
it has. The research, there's a research team with A+ schools from OU, OSU, UCO, and I think there's a researcher from Tulane and one in University of Pittsburgh who formed the research team. And looking at the qualitative data, it's very interesting to see how school environment has changed over time. And they said what's interesting is not only do students want to be in school, they love going to school, but the teachers love going to school. And it's amazing, the need for substitutes is way down. And teachers who don't enjoy school environments find lots of excuses not to come to school. Mm-hmm. And so that has been a changing factor as well.
Victoria, I see your hand up. Austin.
I know there's a lot of pressure on teachers for them to meet the objectives that are in the standardized testing, like benchmark testing and EOI. Do you feel that may hinder the creativity of students?
Well, I know that there's a lot of evidence that if teachers teach to the test, it does hinder creativity. Because you're asking children to just regurgitate factual information. And it's proven in research that that is short-term learning, and it's not deep learning, and it's not critical learning. We are looking through Creative Oklahoma at some very interesting legislation in Oklahoma that was passed in Massachusetts called the Creativity Challenge Index. And if Oklahoma is able to adopt this legislation, it would form a commission that would look at different assessments that would assess creativity in schools in Oklahoma, school by school. And we're looking at that as something that could come along existing federally mandated, accountability measures that do not take creativity into account.
Austin.
I know I'm an elementary English teacher, and I want to know what's the difference between like a regular elementary school, what
I would have to encourage you to visit A+ schools, and especially those who've been in the network for a while, and I think the website can tell you which schools have been in the system longer. When I walk into A+ elementary schools versus non-A+ schools, whether they're public or private schools, all elementary schools have small kids, so they're cute and it's fun, and there's usually artwork on the walls, and that's great. But most traditional schools are still set up with a teacher's desk at the front of the classroom with lines of chairs and a certain course of work where children would use worksheets. There may or may not be a music teacher or an art teacher. There may or may not be a lot of hands-on experiential learning. There may or may not be collaboration amongst the teachers. When I walk into the high demonstration A+ schools, there's a lot of activity. It seems a little bit noisier, but the children are very happy. They're working, even if they don't have tables, desks have been pushed together so kids can work together on projects. It's a lot of project-oriented work. And in A+ schools, instead of having just, okay, we're going to have a school play in December, a performance, A+ schools have informances. So if you visit the school, any classroom at any time could drop everything and do an informants to inform parents or guests about their learning. And those are very interesting because students build their own level of self-esteem and confidence in being able to articulate their learning at the drop of a hat. So those are, I would just encourage you to see for yourself, because I think you don't want to compare school to school, but I think it's a climate that encourages creativity instead of stifling it.
So did you get to meet Blake with Tom's shoes?
I did.
You did?
I did.
What's he like?
I did. He was...
I sort of like Blake.
Yeah. No, he was very interesting, and he was in Oklahoma for a short period of time. For those of you who did not attend the Creativity World Forum, there was a group of university students from Oklahoma Christian who had developed a nonprofit about clean water and raising money for clean water in Africa. And they participated in a water walk, about 200 students from the Oklahoma River to the Cox Center. And Blake participated in the water walk, which was surprising to us. We didn't know he was going to do that.
And they were barefoot, right?
They walked barefoot, carrying jugs of water from the Oklahoma River to the Cox Center to demonstrate how difficult it is in some third world countries where every day people will have to walk long distances with jugs or some type of container carrying potable water to their home. And oftentimes these water walks are barefoot, because in a lot of countries people have no shoes and they're walking across very difficult terrain without shoes, carrying their water.
And you mentioned this nonprofit group was started by a student at
Oklahoma Christian. There was a student, he's a senior this year at Oklahoma Christian, and in his dorm room with a couple of friends, they had heard the story about I believe it's in Kenya, I'm not sure, how difficult it is to come by clean water. And they started their own nonprofit, and it has spread to, I think, 50 campuses across the U.S., raising $5,000 per water well that is dug, and the indigenous people are taught how to obtain clean water through a very interesting clean water well process that was developed by Oklahoma Christian students. And it's very interesting.
What do we do if we're in a class and the teacher is definitely not embracing this creative style you're talking about? There's some teachers here who blow you away how creative they are. It's like you're rethinking everything. But then
Right.
cell phone, you're just, wow, I've been setting out the, you know what I
Right.
mean? So,
Well, I think the world is a world in transition. And I have a 16-year-old in high school, and he complains to me about this very issue every day. And I just have to say, you have to understand that as the world changes, that system change is difficult and slow within especially educational systems. But fortunately here at Northeastern, you do have leadership that gets it. So I don't know if there's any student opportunity for student voice when it comes to faculty review, but it's very important that your voices are heard if there is that type of process within your institution to let your administrators know this faculty member is not getting it. We're not encouraged to think outside the box or to think deeply about subject areas. We're not allowed to debate. We're not allowed to work collaboratively. As my son tells me, he says, Mom, what I'm being taught in some of my classes, he said, I can go to the internet and just read this factual information. I don't need to have someone lecturing me and telling me to take notes on it and then be tested. He said, I want to think more about the depth of the issue. So I think that is how change occurs. Your voice needs to be heard. I hope that's all right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? We're at our 3 o'clock hour. Susan, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend the afternoon with you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.